MysteryWire.com, home of the unusual and unknown. From Area 51 to the paranormal, it's your source to the most vetted UFO stories and special investigations in the world. Take a journey into the universe of MysteryWire.com.
All right, thank you for joining us. Duncan Phoenix, the producer of Mystery Wire. We're going to try this podcast thing again. Joining us to my right or left, depending on which way you're looking at, is George Knapp over there. How you doing, George?
Hey there.
And down below George to the right or left is Matt, photographer extraordinaire. Very safe and sanitary at home, as we all are. And
That's
then
right.
the face you might not recognize over there is Gabe Zeifman, correct?
Right. Yep.
Now, Gabe, you may not know him, but you definitely might know his work. Gabe is the gentleman who took this picture behind me. If you look at this picture, that's Area 51. Really nice shot of Area 51. Gabe had the opportunity to fly over Area 50, well, not over, let me be correct, to fly near Area 51 not too long ago, relatively close. Gabe, go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit. How did you get up in the air around Area 51?
Oh, so it's just been interesting, that whole airspace and test training range out there, and I decided to go fly out there one day, and they let me get pretty close, and I took some pictures, and I thought, well, that was pretty cool, and I'd like to try to get some better ones, so I went back with a better camera. So I ended up getting some pretty interesting shots from some unique angles. I guess just the airspace access was kind of by chance, but yeah.
Gabe, do you think you are allowed to get in there closer than ever before because of the virus, the pandemic shut down, that some of the things out there, their shields are lowered in effect?
Not really. The first time I went was back in November, so it wasn't like a factor then. It was just a weekend when there was really no activity on the ranges. So yeah, I think it's more just like the activity, what they're protecting airspace for.
Is the way sort of a way you can describe how close you were this last time when you took all these great photos compared to what it normally would be?
So on the south side, the closest I've gotten is about 9 nautical miles, and that's pretty much as close as you can get. And then this last weekend, I got about 11 miles on the east, and I actually wasn't even in restricted airspace. So you can go where I went last weekend any time, whatever the airspace status is. So that only the east side is not within restricted airspace, so you can do that whenever. But yeah, that's what I did last weekend. But the 2 times before, I was able to go in restricted airspace and get slightly closer, but from those different sides.
Can you tell us about your day job? Because I mean, I think it has a lot to do with how careful you are. I mean, you know this stuff. You know what restricted airspace means because of where you work. So you take it seriously, right? Yeah.
So I'm an air traffic controller, civilian and everything. But the facility I work at, we do have restricted airspace for hazardous activities. So, yeah, I definitely respect the airspace and understand how it works. And restricted airspace primarily exists to prevent you from, as a non-participating pilot, from being injured by something, whatever it could be, lasers, debris, high-speed aircraft. There's all sorts of hazards. I think the definition says, a lot of hazards that could be unseen by a pilot that you can't effectively avoid. So that's the primary reason restricted airspace exists, is to separate non-participating aircraft from hazardous activities. But yeah, so you definitely want to respect that stuff. Who knows exactly what they're doing in there, but definitely not something you want to mess with.
You've heard the stories over the years about pilots who mistakenly or otherwise stray into that space, maybe to take photos, maybe just to get a peek, maybe they're just not paying attention. I mean, it's very serious what happens to them.
Yeah, definitely. The enforcement action is no joke for violators. You definitely don't want to stray inside it, go somewhere that you have not been authorized.
What would happen?
So I don't think I think you hear people talk about, oh, you're going to get shot down or intercepted. And I think that is very unlikely. I think the most likely scenario is going to be assuming you're talking to air traffic, which is definitely highly recommended. They're going to first warn you. And I've received that, just heads up about the boundary. They're going to tell you boundaries, 1 mile, 2 miles away, verify you're familiar with the airspace. And if you say, yeah, then that's pretty much the end of it. They're going to make sure you don't touch it. If it looks like you're going to, continue and violate it, they're going to do their best to turn you away from it. And then if you do violate it, they're going to try to get you out of there. And if you're not talking, they're going to try broadcasting the blind on the emergency frequency. But either way, if you did violate it, they're going to try to track you down. And if you're talking on the radio, they're going to give you what's called a Brasher warning. They're going to tell you possible pilot deviation. They're going to give you a phone number to call. And then they would forward that to air traffic, quality assurance. And then they'll decide if that merits further investigation from FAA, flight standards, the enforcement branch, and then they would decide what to do then, whether they don't do anything, whether they give a warning, recommend training, or suspension, or revoke your license. So there's all sorts of options on that side, whether it was a willful violation, or if you just had some kind of equipment failure or something. So they take all that into account.
Matt, you want to jump into this?
Well, what kind of camera were you using on this?
So the north-south pictures, the first time I went, I just had my cell phone. So
Oh, wow.
The ones down the runway, that was on a Google Pixel 4. And then the rest of them you have there are off a Nikon D3500 that
I was wondering if any of you, Gabe, George, Matt, if any of you, as we're putting these pictures up, do any of you know, outside of just, hey, that's Area 51, do you know what we're looking at? Like when, I'm going to try to be my weather guy here, you see the runways, you see the large dry lake bed, which also has runways on it. Some of them look better than others, especially like when you look at Google Earth and satellite images. You see some hangars. You see an outlying hangar way down at the end. Do any of you know anything about what we're seeing here?
Gabe, you could talk about the runways, maybe.
I don't know a lot of details. Like I can definitely identify in the close-ups like a couple navigation aids. Like it's called a TACAN, so that would be just a ground-based navigation aid that planes would more or less home into. And then you can see the control tower. I know that runway on the left is closed. The right one is the main used runway. But I mean, as far as like the specifics on the buildings, I don't really know anything.
There's some pretty detailed information online. Lazy G Ranch has a lot of information about the base and what the facilities are. Dreamlandresort.com has a lot of information. People have written pretty extensive articles about what those buildings might represent, the red hat section, things of that sort. But I'm not an expert on it. I would hate to hazard a guess, and there are a lot more knowledgeable people who maybe we'll bring some of them on who can talk about what they suspect is going on out there. But I don't want to say it.
Gabe, you had a chance to not only see this base a couple of times, you've seen other bases out there, other runways. Describe this, especially the Tonopah test range. You got to see that pretty well.
Yeah. So like what you're seeing out there?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's a pretty similar layout throughout. You have your rows of hangars and pretty clear access to the runway, and then there's usually a couple navigation facilities, but I guess nothing.
This is a view of Tonopah.
Yeah, and then Tonopah is interesting because they have the runway partially tore up, so I don't know exactly what they're doing out there, reinforcing something, or maybe something failed on the runway. But I've heard people say it looks like they're expanding taxiways for possibly a larger aircraft. So I don't know exactly, but
We posted a lot of your photos, Gabe. Can't thank you enough for sharing them with us.
yeah.
After Tyler Rogoway put that article out, and then we put it out on Mystery Wire, what kind of reaction are you hearing? Any negative feedback or mostly positive? Are you a celebrity now?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I think a lot of people think it's kind of, funny or cool, and I haven't personally got anything negative. I've seen a couple comments on various, articles or posts, and it's mostly about, oh, well, this guy's gonna get arrested or whatever. Okay, and my response is, I was in a $16,000 airplane with the engine power of a lawnmower, with a camera I got at Costco. So if I was able to get these pictures, it's not that difficult. But yeah, I mean, mostly been positive stuff. I've had various emails asking some questions, and if I can go back out there, and definitely I've gotten some questions about, well, what did you see at Papoose Lake? And it really nothing, but
they have, of course, you talk to the roadrunners, the guys who've worked out there over the years, and they say that when a plane approaches, they're aware of it. When somebody is out on the Tickaboo Peak or something with a camera, they're aware of that as well. So they were aware that you were flying around out there, just as they're aware when foreign satellites are flying over the base, right?
yeah, no, yeah, I'm always talking to air traffic. They know who I am. I'm positively identified on radar, and I also go anywhere between like 70 and 100 knots. So they've got plenty of notice that I'm on the way. So yeah, no, there's nothing. Nobody's surprised when I'm there.
So you were in two-way communication with the tower out there.
Well, with Nellis
With Nellis.
approach control, yeah. So
Gabe,
they're
thanks
the
for it.
overline radar facility.
Thanks a lot for sharing these photos with the world and with us. And
Yeah,
hope you'll stay in touch. If you get some more, maybe we could go with you one of these times.
yeah, definitely. I've been invited back to Rachel. I landed up there once a couple months ago, so that was interesting. So like to go visit there again and see if I can get back in the ranges. It'd be cool to get some more better pictures from some other angles now that I have a better camera. But,
It was awesome. Great job. Great work. Thanks.
yeah, thanks.
All right.
Gabe, thank you very much. We look forward to talking with you again. And we're going to continue this podcast. Gabe, I'm going to say goodbye and wish you well.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe.
All right.
We got a big reaction to that, right, Duncan?
Yes, yeah, we've had a very good reaction to that. A lot of people, thousands and thousands of people, looking at Gabe's pictures. He has become quite the sort of an unexpected celebrity in the community. I think. I know I was looking at the Dreamland Resorts website, and he is the talk of the town right now. He is very popular. Let's just say.
Awesome.
And George and Matt, this is something. Have you guys, either of you guys, ever gotten to see this with your own eyes?
George and I were on a flight once to Reno. I think we were going to Carson City, and I'm always one of those people that's staring out the windows when we're flying. And I've always looked that way because I've made that flight an uncountable number of times. And I'm always looking, and one time I just see that iconic runway and that dry lake, and it was just perfectly framed up. And I remember, I think I tapped George on the shoulder. I was like, George, look, there it is. And I think I even snapped a picture with my iPhone, but that was the only time that I've really seen into the base.
I've seen it a couple of times. It used to be a place called Freedom Ridge where you could get pretty close to the base. You climb up this ridge and you could use visual aids and telescopes and binoculars and things to take a look at the base. And then the government took that away. And then there was a place called Whitesides Mountain, which was outside the base itself. But I climbed that one year in the mid 90s. Got a pretty good look at the base from there. Now the only place you can really see it from the ground is Tickaboo. and you got to have a really powerful lens, and it's a heck of a climb to get up there. But yeah, there's a lot of people have been able to get a glimpse of the base. A couple of times over the years since we've been covering Area 51, pilots have strayed a little too close, and the stories are kind of legendary. There was a British TV producer who flew there and got really close, and then all of a sudden you see an F-16 pull up alongside of him and told him to get the hell out of there, basically. And there are stories about pilots who made the mistake of flying over and that they were forced down to land, and they get a very terse warning once they land. They get debriefed. Some of them have been detained. Same as people on the ground who have strayed over the border. A lot of people over the years, Matt and I have heard these stories from dozens of people who want to plan to try to infiltrate the base and sneak on and get photos. It's a really bad idea, just as that idea of storming Area 51 was a bad idea, because they will catch you. They got sensors of all kinds out there. They will find you. We had the story that we posted on Mystery Wire about the unfortunate tour bus driver a couple of years ago who was talking to his passengers in the back and blew right past the warning sign. And he gets driving a little bit further and realizes, hey, where are those guys? Where are the camo dudes? And they were right up behind him. He had crossed the line, and they forced him out, debriefed and detained the passengers as well. They were all threatened with big fines, and I think they let him off with a warning, but the driver was prevented from touring that place for the next couple of years. I don't know if he's doing it again now or not. So they're very serious about their security out there.
Yeah, we were taken on a tour of the outskirts by a man named Chuck Clark who used to live in Rachel. He doesn't live there anymore. And he was using an RF detector that was picking up radio frequencies, and he was picking up these pings off the side of the road when he drove. And so he decided to investigate further, and whenever he started kind of digging in the dirt, he found all these electronic devices. Well, he took George and I out there and showed us how he found them, and we were on public land. We were not on the base property. And I think it was a week later, the FBI came knocking at his door and took his computer, and I think he decided to stop poking around after that.
Yeah, the Joint Terrorism Task Force came into Rachel. They took everything, his computers, his photos, all kinds of equipment and material that had nothing to do with anything on Area 51. And he was out of town at the time and was pretty scared. He was facing some charges for destroying government property. And of course, while we were with him, he did not destroy any government property. That government property, as Matt mentioned, was way out on public land anyway. But Chuck Clark, I think, decided that was enough. That was the end of his career as probing the outskirts of Area 51.
Well, the government claimed that he had removed one of them, but we were with him when this occurred, and it was no different than if you and I were hiking out on BLM land and we kicked one of these things. I mean, the exact same thing could happen. You could dislodge it. It wasn't really hidden so well that he had to like get out a spade. It was more like, hey, I'm going to kick some rocks to the side and look, here this thing is laying here.
Yeah.
So I'm relatively new to the world of this. You guys have been doing this for a long time now. Not to date you, but for a few years. Where does this stack up? Having this this gentleman getting this sort of visual access. Where does this stack up in the realm of Area 51? You know, you've got Bob Lazar. You've got so many other stories from former people that claim to know what's going on out there. How does this stack up?
These are pretty good photos. I mean, they're really clear, and he's got a lot of them, and you know, it shows pretty much everything that's out there. So they're really good. There are other photos sort of like this, but these are new. They're recent, so they've got a lot of attention. You know, there are satellite photos that have been available online that have been taken by Russia. There's Google Earth images. There are the ones that aren't clouded on purpose. Maybe the best close-up photos I ever saw were from John Lear. This was taken I think in the early 80s. He and Jim Goodall used to go out there. And in those days, before the public land seizure, you could drive right up to the edge of the base, which is what he did. Took some photos of the control tower and some radar arrays and things of that sort. And I think those days are gone. That'll never happen again. But we, Channel 8 used to go out there and go right up to the guard shack, which is another 11 miles beyond what is now the perimeter of the base. And you could stand there and do stand-ups and take videos, and they didn't get too upset about it, but those days are gone forever.
To me, the most interesting thing are the angles that he's gotten, and they're angles that you cannot get them any other way than from an aircraft. And he's flying at, I would guess, a pretty low altitude, and so that's another thing that really makes it different. You see, you can really see the proportions of the size of some of those hangars. They are enormous, and I've seen photos of them before, but a lot of times they're kind of off by themselves and you can't see them compared to other buildings. So the size is lost. But some of these photos, I'm looking at one now, it's just the size of these hangars. I cannot imagine how big they are inside.
And what the project is that's being housed there.
Right.
So moving on, got a couple other things to talk about. Lately, George, we just spotlighted a couple of guys that you had spoken to from the UK, talking about that there's a similar site there as to Skinwalker Ranch up in Utah. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is an interview we conducted, 2 interviews that Matt and I conducted at a UFO expo in Los Angeles a while back. And these were 2 guys I really wanted to talk to, Stephen Mira and Barry Fitzgerald. And they sort of are Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid of British and Irish ufology. I think Barry started by investigating ghost cases, and Stephen has a UFO themed magazine that he publishes online. They joined forces to sort of figure out what they're looking for is kind of a unified theory of weirdness. Is there something that ties together these various kinds of paranormal phenomena, what we call paranormal, that ties them all together, that links them together? The kinds of things that you have at Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. So you have poltergeist type activity, UFOs, orbs, Bigfoot and creature sightings, animal mutilations, crop circles, all that stuff happening in one place, which I think justifiably ranks it as maybe the weirdest place in the world, certainly the most intensely scientifically studied paranormal hotspot in the world. And these guys have been looking into whether there are similar places elsewhere in the world. That's the same thing that NIDS did. That's the same thing that BASS did on the OSAP study, looking for other places that they could investigate to see, again, if they could find out the common link. What links all these different phenomena together? And Stephen and Barry shared with us in this interview that there are a couple of places like that in the UK. There is a sheep ranch that has been the site of hundreds of mutilation incidents over the last couple of years, being investigated by a team that's there on the ground. In addition to the mutilations, the locals are reporting strange lights in the sky, creatures, crypto creatures being seen, what you might call ghost type activity, all in the same area. So they're on the ground and trying to figure it out. And Steve and Barry have been in touch with him. Barry, I believe, has been to Skinwalker Ranch in Utah and has conferred with the team that's studying it now to compare notes. The 2 of them gave us a great interview about some of the factors that they look for, measurable factors that they look for that seem to pop up at multiple of these hotspots. Geomagnetic anomalies is something that they look for when they're investigating these places where there's multiple different kinds of phenomena. So it's a really cool interview, and I hope people will check it out. There are several references to their work and how it coincides with what's going on at Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. And we're getting a lot of good feedback on it since we posted it on Thursday.
Yeah, and you can see if you go to MysteryWire.com, like George was saying, you can see we've broken it up into 3 different sections, appropriately titled. You'll see them all on the same story, but definitely check those out. They're worth taking a look at.
And Matt, you and I've been a lot of interviews, a lot of conferences. Those guys were pretty good, weren't they?
Yeah, it was really good. And I think the people who look into this and put much time towards it and much thought, no one is looking at Skinwalker Ranch and saying, wow, there's all these completely separate events happening here. It must be the strangest place in the world. And the kind of one of the conclusions that they've come to, which, you can see in George and Colin Kelleher's book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, one of the ideas, and many people have fallen into this and started thinking along the same lines, is this isn't this isn't a whole bunch of separate things happening. This isn't a whole bunch of separate entities all stalking this ranch. There is a relation. There's some sort of relationship with these. I mean, how is a UFO related to a dire wolf? I can't answer that question, but there's definitely, it's all related and it's all tied together to the same phenomenon.
And just in case any of you listening or watching are not familiar with the term Skinwalker, we've also put on the side a nice page, an explainer, you might, a quick explainer of where the term Skinwalker comes from. It's an old Navajo term, Navajo Native American term. Not quite a witch doctor, sort of, but kind of explains their beliefs behind it, that a human could be made into a skinwalker, a shapeshifter of sorts. Just a fascinating backstory that goes back thousands of years.
There's I put it on my Twitter, and we should definitely post it to the Mystery Wire website. But if you go on to my Twitter account, which is @ChiefTog, you'll see a video that George and I shot, and I think it's been 2 years now. It was 2018, I think, when we shot it, and it's a drive-through completely through Skinwalker Ranch from basically the first main homestead where the ranch house is and the NIDS study trailer. And it's a drive down the road, right down the middle of the road, and you get to go through all the different gates. George makes an appearance or two in it as he's opening gates, and I'm driving through. And you can see the ridge.
I think I have that linked in one of our stories. If not, I will make sure it gets there. I'll put it in all the current Skinwalker stories, because it's worth watching.
Yeah, it's a good tour for those who are really interested in seeing it, and also whoever. Someone had mentioned that George and I had never been to the ranch before, which was strange, but they could watch this and they could see. I think you're about to see George get out of the car right here. Here he is, George. That's the ranch. That's George.
And I'm not getting out to take a pee, right? That's right.
No, he's opening a gate.
So
again, George, you told us too. Since you have been there, you though haven't actually experienced anything that other people say they've experienced.
No, I've been there a couple dozen times. Matt's been there with me since I think 2001 or 2002. We've been traveling there, and I was there a few times before that, and I've never experienced anything completely out of the ordinary. We saw some lights one time. That's as close as I got. Everybody else gets to see it but us. But the video that Matt shows, he drives all the way through the ranch and then drives back. So it's as if you could look out either window to see what's on the other side. It's a really cool split screen video, and I don't think there's anyone else has done that at any time. So if you ever want to see close up what the whole place looks like, that's it.
Go ahead, Matt.
I've got front and rear view cameras too. I just haven't posted those yet. I figured I'd wait and post those next. These are a little more interesting, but the front and rear are pretty cool too.
Now we're running tight on time here, but if lately I've noticed, I know George, you've noticed, there's been seems to be at least an uptick in videos showing claimed UFOs or flying objects or mysterious objects, lights in the sky. Do you think that has anything to do with just more people being at home, more access to cameras, or do you think there's something else happening?
I got a feeling it has a lot to do with people being at home and having time on their hands, taking walks, looking up at the sky. I mean, that has a lot to do with when you see spikes of activity related to UFOs. Just a word of caution with UFO videos that pop up online. There's a variety of reasons why people post these things. There are hoaxsters. There are people who make a living at this stuff that create. There was a video of something that's crossing the surface of the moon that was on Twitter and a bunch of social media places in the last week or so. And it's pretty much been debunked as a CGI fraud. And it looks like it was done on purpose. So sometimes people do it as sort of a test of the UFO community. Sometimes they do it as sort of a sick joke. And sometimes they do it so that they can increase the number of clicks on their websites or something to monetize it. Always take those things with a grain of salt. The history of ufology shows that these things do come in waves. There are spikes, peaks, and valleys of UFO activity. We don't exactly know why that happens, but a lot of people out there, millions of people have cameras now in their hands. And so I would not be surprised to see more videos popping up. But again, always look at it with the critical eye, because just because it appears on some website or on Twitter does not mean it's legit.
And I want to speak to that as well. I mean, there are a lot of things that modern day cameras can do. They're amazing. They can do great things. But go out tonight with your camera and take a picture of the moon and tell me how that looks. Tell me how that looks. It looks terrible. You wouldn't even know if it was the moon. So you look at this video recently where these tic-tac-like objects are traveling across the face of the moon, and they're casting a shadow across the craters, which is really amazing. You look at it, you're like, ooh, that's amazing. Look which direction the light is coming from the sun. And look which direction these tic-tacs are lit from, and look where the shadows are. None of these things line up. It's clearly faked. It's not even really a good fake. They could have done a much better job.
And it's not just UFO videos out there. I've noticed the past few days there's been a couple of Bigfoot sighting videos that, while on face value make for a good story, end up just being some guy with a mask that wants to create a little trouble.
You will see that even with photos of UFOs that are generally considered legitimate, that have withstood the test of time, that have been analyzed and reanalyzed, even those kind of things, people will find a way to debunk them. So take it all with a grain of salt and be careful.
And that includes any programs that you might be seeing on TV. Just because they're on TV, just because they're being aired on a network that you may, I don't know, take seriously, just be careful of what you're watching.
All right, so we got to wrap this up. George, thank you very much. Matt, thank you very much. Gabe, thank you very much if you're watching this with us. And we will get back with everybody next week. We're still all living at home right now, so be safe, stay clean, and we'll talk to you soon.
MysteryWire.com, home of the unusual and unknown. From Area 51 to the paranormal, it's your source to the most vetted UFO stories and special investigations in the world. Take a journey into the universe of MysteryWire.com.